He signed the check without reading the number twice, because for him the number did not matter anymore, only the name written above it did, Eleanor Voss. He had not spoken that name out loud in 11 years, but he had never once stopped hearing it in his head, especially on the nights when the boardrooms emptied out and the city lights below his office looked less like success and more like 1,000 small windows he would never be invited through again. He was 39 years old. He was the founder of a logistics company worth more money than he had ever imagined touching when he was a boy who owned 2 shirts and 1 pair of shoes with a hole starting in the left sole. His name was Julian Marsh, though for the first 14 years of his life, he had been registered in the county system simply as case number 4471. A boy nobody had claimed moved through 6 different homes before he landed, almost by administrative accident, on the porch of a woman who ran a modest foster house on the edge of a town most maps did not bother to label. That woman was Eleanor Voss. And 2 weeks ago, a private investigator he had quietly hired to check in on her, as he did every few years without ever making contact, had sent him a report that made him stand very still in the middle of his own kitchen at 11 at night, holding his phone like it might shatter. The report said 3 things. It said Eleanor Voss, 74 years old, had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease 14 months earlier. It said her small house, the same house with the same crooked porch step he used to skip over as a boy, was 90 days from foreclosure because she had stopped remembering to pay the property taxes and nobody had noticed in time. And it said she was, according to the neighbor who had finally called the county on her behalf, largely alone. Julian did not sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen island with the lights off, remembering a version of himself that his employees, his investors, his carefully curated public biography had never met. The boy who arrived at Eleanor's house with a single trash bag of clothes, who did not speak for the first 11 days, who flinched when anyone raised a hand near his face, even to hand him a plate of food. Eleanor had not tried to fix him quickly. She had simply left a bowl of cereal on the table every morning at 7 and gone about her business, humming to herself, letting him decide on his own time whether the house was safe. It took him 3 weeks to eat at the table instead of the corner of the kitchen floor. She never once mentioned that she had noticed the difference. She had 4 other foster children living there at various points during his 2 years in her care, and she never had money, not really, not the kind that bought anything beyond necessity. But she had a way of making necessity feel like enough. She fixed his shoes with a hot glue gun rather than telling him they could not afford new ones. She taught him to read using a stack of dog-eared paperbacks from the library discard bin, sitting beside him on a couch with a broken spring, patient with every stumble. She was the first adult who had ever told him, and meant it, that he was not a problem to be managed, but a person worth knowing. He left her house at 16 when a distant aunt resurfaced and took custody. Mostly, he later understood, for the monthly stipend. He wrote Eleanor letters for the first year. She wrote back every time, always ending with the same line. You are doing fine, and you are going to keep doing fine, because I taught you how. Eventually, the letters slowed, then stopped, the way most things stop between a teenager building a new life and an old woman quietly living out her own. He told himself he would go back and thank her properly once he had actually become something. He built the company at 26. He told himself he would go back once it stabilized. He told himself many versions of once, and none of them ever arrived. Because there is always a next quarter, a next funding round, a next reason to postpone facing the person who knew you when you had nothing to hide behind. Now she was disappearing into her own mind. And her house, the only stable thing that had ever existed in his early life, was 90 days from being taken from her. He did not call her. He told himself it was because the sound of his voice, a grown man's voice, might frighten or confuse her, given what the report said about her memory. The truth, the one he did not say even to himself in full sentences, was that he was terrified she would not recognize him, and more terrified that she would. So Julian did what he had learned to do with every problem in his adult life. He solved it from a distance with money and precision, and made absolutely certain his name was nowhere near it. He hired a small legal firm 3 states away from his headquarters and instructed them to quietly pay off Eleanor's property tax debt in full. Structured as an anonymous benefactor payment routed through a community trust so that no single name would ever surface in county records. He arranged for her mortgage, paid off decades ago, but remortgaged years back during a medical scare he had not known about, to be cleared entirely. He set up a private in-home caregiver, a warm, unhurried woman named Dolores, introduced to Eleanor as a volunteer from a local senior support nonprofit, a nonprofit Julian had created 8 days earlier and would fund for the rest of Eleanor's life. He had the crooked porch step fixed. He almost told the contractor to leave that one step alone, out of some sentimental instinct, before catching himself and remembering that Eleanor could no longer safely navigate an uneven step, sentiment or not. For weeks, reports came back to him through the law firm. Eleanor was safe. Eleanor was confused about the sudden appearance of a paid caregiver, but had, in her own words to Dolores, decided to simply enjoy the help, since questioning good fortune had never gotten her anywhere useful. Eleanor still sat on her porch most afternoons. Eleanor still hummed while she moved through the house, though some days she hummed to a version of the house that existed 15 years earlier, calling out to children who were long grown and gone. It should have been enough. Julian told himself it was enough. He had fixed the only thing that had ever actually mattered, and he had done it without asking anything of her, without needing her to know, without risking the unbearable possibility of standing in front of her and hearing her ask who he was. Then Dolores sent him a photograph, forwarded through the law firm with a short note. While cleaning out a hallway closet to make space for medical equipment, she had found a box of old composition notebooks Eleanor kept from her decades of fostering children. Inside one, dated to a year Julian recognized instantly because it was carved permanently into his memory, was a page Dolores had photographed because she thought it seemed important. It was not addressed to anyone. It was simply Eleanor's handwriting, unmistakable even after all these years. The same handwriting from the letters he used to receive. The entry described a boy who had arrived silent and flinching, who took 3 weeks to eat at the table. It described the day he finally spoke his first full sentence to her, which was not a question or a complaint, but an observation. He told her the porch light attracted moths because moths navigate by the moon, and porch lights confuse them into circling something that will never lead them anywhere. Eleanor had written that she cried after he went to bed that night, not from sadness, but because she understood in that moment that this particular boy noticed the world with a precision most adults never developed, and that whatever harm had been done to him had not managed to take that from him. She wrote one more line beneath it, underlined twice. Whatever this child becomes, I hope he builds something that gives lost things a way home. Julian read it standing in his office at nearly midnight, and for the first time since founding his company, he understood with sudden and total clarity what he had unconsciously named it after. Compass Freight. He had told investors for years it was simply a strong, memorable word for a logistics company, something about direction and reliability. He had never once consciously connected it to anything. He sat with the photograph for a long time. The next morning, he canceled every meeting on his calendar and flew, for the first time in 3 years, on a commercial flight instead of a private one, because some part of him needed the ordinary discomfort of it, the reminder of what it felt like to be an unremarkable person moving through the world. He did not call ahead. He did not send Dolores a warning. He drove a rental car down the same road he had walked as a boy, past the same church, the same gas station with a new coat of paint over the old sign, until the crooked house with its now perfectly even porch step came into view. Eleanor was sitting outside, exactly as she used to, a blanket over her knees despite the mild afternoon, watching the street the way people watch something they are trying very hard to place. Julian stood at the end of the walkway for a long moment, and for the first time in over a decade of boardrooms and acquisitions and negotiations worth more money than this entire street would see in 100 years, he felt something close to the fear of a 14-year-old boy standing outside a stranger's door with a single trash bag of clothes. He walked up slowly, She watched him the entire way, her expression unreadable. Somewhere between curiosity and the particular caution of someone whose memory has become unreliable and who has learned not to trust her own certainty. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Eleanor," he said, his voice